Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel we post writing tips, unboxings, book hauls, book reviews and the occasional vlog. And today we are reviewing In Memoriam by Alice Winn. This was a super popular book. This was a book club read for me and I read it so quickly. There's been a lot of hype about this book, so I was hesitant. I don't know why. I'm just sometimes hesitant if a book has like too much hype. It was so good. As always with my book reviews, I'll read you guys the blurb first. Before we get into that, don't forget if you like what you see to subscribe to this channel. Your continued support means a lot, so thank you guys so much. It was only because Gaunt knew he might die that he could be so reckless as to kiss him. In 1914, war feels far away to Henry Gaunt and Sidney Elwood. They're too young to enlist, and anyway, Gaunt is fighting his own private battle, an all-consuming infatuation with the dreamy, poetic Elwood, not having a clue that his best friend is in love with him and always has been. When Gaunt's mother asks him to enlist in the British Army to protect the family from anti-German attacks, he signs up immediately, relieved to escape his overwhelming feelings. But Elwood and their classmates soon follow him into the horrors of the trenches. Though Elwood and Gaunt find fleeting moments of solace in one another, their friends are dying in front of them, and at any moment they could be next. This has a load of good reviews. We have Maggie O'Farrell, who is the author of Hamnet, a devastating love story between two young men that moves from the sheltered idyll of their public school to the unspeakable horrors of the Western Front during the First World War. Gaunt and Elwood will live in your mind long after you've closed the final pages. Bonnie Garmus, who is the author of Lessons in Chemistry. If you haven't read it, you're missing out. You know, Hamnet and Lessons in Chemistry were both Waterstones Book of the Year, and this was also Waterstones Book of the Year. From I, an epic sweep and an incredible intimacy make In Memoriam feel vividly alive. War is hell, yes, but somehow love endures. You read it with your heart in your throat and your knuckles white, the debut of the year. On the front we have Sunday Times, a genuine page-turner, Sarah Collins, an instant classic, Observer, epic and intimate, and Elizabeth Day, I loved it with a startling ferocity, and finally Joanna Quinn, Birdsong for a new generation. So this follows, as the blurb said, two boys, Elwood and Gaunt, who go to a private school in England when the war breaks out. Now you could enlist, I believe, from the age of 18, but there were boys a lot younger than that who went to the front, and most did not come home. The private school boys were instantly made officers. Now, statistically, also I've been told, officers tended to die quicker than other soldiers, and the other soldiers were the general public who were sent out. But if you went to private school, you were obviously made an officer straight away, and that's what happens to these boys. The start of this book seemed, in our book club, some people found it a bit slow. I quite enjoyed it, but it did remind me very heavily of The Liar by Stephen Fry. This is all about boys in a private school and the shenanigans that goes on there. Popped into my head whilst reading this. As always with my book reviews, I will do spoiler free first, then I'll give you a spoiler alert and a time to skip to avoid the spoilers. First of all, I wanted to mention how the start of this book begins like a newspaper, and I absolutely adored that. I actually read that, so because it was a book club read, me and Matt share the book, so one of us reads it and then the other, and Matt read this one first and he started it whilst we were staying at his parents' house. So we woke up in the morning and he started a fresh book, and I found myself reading the newspaper over his shoulder because I was just intrigued. And this is, the formatting throughout is peppered with letters, with newspapers, and then general writing. And I really enjoyed that because A, it breaks it up, but also it made you feel like you were there. So you were searching through the list for names that you knew of characters to see who had died, which was, it's tough to read. My first quote is from page 25. "Where's Jaunty Gaunty?" he asked, grabbing Elwood's bread roll. "Give that back, you utter heathen." Pritchard licked the roll and handed it back to Elwood. I wanted this quote in there because it just shows you how young they are. The fact that, you know, they're doing what sibling... I did this to my sister many times. where, you know, you nick something or you have the last of something and they want it, so you lick it and then offer it back, which obviously they then don't want. It's such a childish thing to do that most people, I'm sure, have done, especially if you have siblings. So the fact that in this boarding school, that is what they do, and yet they're going to be sent to war. Page 39. So Gaunt receives a letter from Elwood. I have folded it up and put it in my inner breast pocket, you know, the pocket where people keep those miraculous Bibles that seem to stop so many bullets in Daily Mail articles. David told me that in his last battalion he had a captain who was so dead set against bullet-stopping Bibles that he used them for target practice. I love that. It's found a cliche in all of the war movies and war stories and just used it. Page 47. David and I share letter censoring duties, and it's much less fun than you would think. David in particular is very disappointed. I thought we'd find out that everyone was secretly a pervert or a murderer, he said. Murder, what a quaint idea. Mostly the men talk about the mud and the rats and God. We have to censor the mud and the rats, but God is allowed to remain, which strikes me as ironic. It is a dull job, but less odious than the other, writing condolences over and over again about men I know or men I don't, about men who died valiantly or men who died in ways I refuse to describe, men I liked and men I didn't, men too old to go to war and boys too young. One runs out of ways to say your son died painlessly and was a credit to the Empire. The worst is when you realise you are addressing the same poor woman twice. 2 letters to thank her for her 2 sons. I don't think they should allow brothers to join regiments together. So that is a letter from Gaunt to Elwood, and I believe that a rule did eventually come in that your final son was not allowed to go, but they could still volunteer, so most still went, because if you didn't, you were hounded by people for being a coward, which is pathetic and ridiculous and awful. So many wrongs. Page 123. Seems the men have been fishing with bombs. I love this. It reminded me of the 3rd Mummy movie when he is fishing and he gives up and just shoots the fish. Loved it. Page 127. Have you come across the Royal Welsh Fusiliers at all in line? I ask because that is the regiment of Winifred's fiancé, Charles. He's back at the front after his head injury. Thank you for writing to her in May. That was kind of you. Will you let me know how he seems if you see him? Winifred says his letters are all wrong. He gets too tired to write much and can't understand her replies. Says she uses too many words. I wish I could help her. She's so distraught on the days when she hears from him because she says it's not like hearing from him at all. If you have any news of him, I know she would be grateful. So this is a letter from Maud, who is Gaunt's sister, and she's asking for a friend because the fiancé had a head injury and was sent home, obviously from a head injury, but then sent back out again. Now, something that was never, ever sorted or talked about in World War I or II were the mental health issues from the war, and head injuries were just not thought about. He obviously is not well, and the war changes people. And it's changing poor Winifred's fiancé after a head injury and after all that he's seen. And you just start slowly seeing this effect in the letters back and forth between Maud and Gaunt, and also Maud and Elwood, and also through Gaunt and Elwood themselves. Page 134. Elwood lay in bed pretending to sleep, and Gaunt began to drink. This whole page really goes into and shows the anxiety of going back to the front, building and building for these two. So they've been on a respite and now they're going back, and you can feel, you don't want them to go, and you can feel it coming off the page how much they don't want to go. Page 176. I want to be a politician, said Maud. You don't want a politician for a wife. Elwood laughed. You can't even vote. I love this because Maud is so independent, and I believe, was it after the First World or Second? Yeah, it was after the First World War, Second World War, that the suffragettes became a thing and fought for votes for women and everything. And I just love how Maud is part of that movement. Page 177. He was dressed in a light wool suit. As his housekeeper had said, his uniform would need to be thoroughly laundered to remove all the lice. "For Sir Chickenheart," said the woman, holding out a white feather, "who dodges trenches so gallantly." Elwood actually snorted at her like a dog. I don't blame him. So in the UK, if a man was believed to not go to war, then they were given a white feather, which was to symbolise cowardice, and it was awful. Elwood had been to the front. He was on break. He just wasn't in uniform. It's so shocking that people did that, and it's just ridiculous. I'm going to say spoiler alert now. I have one more quote for you. Please skip to this time here if you don't want any spoilers from this book. Spoiler alert. So page 227, I'm not going to read you the quote, but I just want to discuss how Gaunt's nightmares and panic attacks are the PTSD from, I'm going to butcher this name, Ypres, from the gas. And it's written so well how this haunts him. And I love how in this book Alice Winn manages to show the effects of all the various parts of the war to such a description. So as a huge spoiler, I am so glad that Hayes and Devi survive. I was so worried about them both. I was searching each newspaper. I was also really upset about Rosemary. I'm butchering the name, but not only does he die after he's become engaged, after surviving the whole war, he dies literally as the shooting stops. And I find it so heartbreaking how many people died after it was declared the war would stop. They should have just stopped shooting immediately. I absolutely hate that part, and I know it's history and I knew this book had to go there. And welcome back if you're here from the spoiler-free zone. I have one more thing I want to discuss, but I don't actually know what page it's in, but it's an image which is really stuck in my head, and it is of when they are walking through the trenches. One of them spots a man and there's a hand coming out of the wall of the trench because the trench is just made of mud. It's got bodies in it, and this man just stops and shakes the hand. He's like, "How do you do?" and just talks to this hand, shaking it. And it's just fantastic showing of people dealing with trauma and how your brain to some extent will just go, yeah, that's fine. I was so glad about two people in this book and very sad about one. I won't tell you who, where, or why. I really, really felt for all the characters in this book. I know this book uses a lot of tropes of books written about the war. I personally haven't read many books about that, so for me it was all great. But it does use the Great Escape, it uses boarding school tropes, it uses the war tropes, all of that. They're all in here. But I like that because I enjoyed the tropes, and I mean the Great Escape was honestly a relief in this. It was like you got sent on a break from the war. And I love how, although Gaunt went first and is affected from the gas, it completely changes Elwood. Fantastic. So let's go into my overall review of this book. For enjoyment, I gave it 10 out of 10. I couldn't put it down. It was really fast to read. World building, a 10 out of 10. I fully envisioned the trenches. Plot, I gave it 10, even though I know it's full of tropes. For me, they were tropes, not cliches. I enjoyed them. Writing style, 10. This is a debut novel, and Alice Winn, superb. Characterization, I gave it a 9. I probably should have gone slightly lower. Sometimes you got people muddled. There's quite a lot of people in this book, and because they're all boarding school, upper class gentlemen, you can get them a bit confused. Representation, a 10, and originality, I gave it a 9. Overall, that makes this a 5-star read for me. So if you see In Memoriam by Alice Winn, I recommend picking it up. And thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed what you see. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to see as soon as I upload, click that little bell down below. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr. I post my own bookish pictures as well as my writing tips and unboxings on there. And thanks for watching, guys. Bye!